Today we're going to be reading from a book called Following Freedom, the Underground Railroad. You're going to be learning some more detailed information about the Underground Railroad. When you finish, what I'm going to have you do is write down some things you learned from each section and then also some questions you still have, and you might get the chance to research that. So, this is the cover of the book. We're not going to be reading all of the book, just some of the book. The first section is Riding the Underground Railroad, and I'm going to read to you now. Conductors. The Underground Railroad was not a train, it was a group of people. They wanted to help people escape from slavery. They did not have a real train, but like a railroad, they used a route or path. They helped escape slaves along this route. This route led to freedom in the North. Conductors were part of the Underground Railroad. They went into slave territory. Slave territory was an area where slaves lived. They guided runaway slaves to freedom. Harriet Tubman was a conductor. She spent her childhood as a slave. She escaped from slavery when she was an adult. She escaped to the city of Philadelphia. Tubman believed it was her right to be free. She would rather be dead than be a slave. She said, "No man should take me alive. I would fight for my freedom so long as my strength lasted." The next page shows a picture of Harriet Tubman. She brought more than 300 slaves to freedom. This is her in her very old age. Leading the way. Jermaine Wesley Logan and Harriet Tubman were friends. Logan was an escaped slave too. When he was 21 years old, he ran away from his owner. He went north to Detroit, Michigan. Then he went on to Canada. And at the bottom, the caption says, "This sign advertised that $100 would be paid to a slave hunter who found and returned the missing slave." On the next page, it says Logan went to school. He became the leader of a church. He also opened 2 schools for black children in New York. He wrote articles for an abolitionist newspaper. The newspaper printed articles that spoke against slavery. Jermaine Wesley Logan helped 1,500 slaves escape to freedom. It was dangerous work, but danger did not stop him. Escaped slaves were always in danger. Slave hunters were paid to find and return slaves. The slave hunters were paid a bounty or reward. They would grab escaped slaves. They would take the slaves back to their owner. There's a picture at the top of Jermaine Wesley Logan, who was, again, a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Next, stations. Escaped slaves headed to the closest free area. Free areas did not allow slavery. Northern cities were often free areas. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Detroit, Michigan were all free areas. People on the Underground Railroad knew how to get slaves to free areas. They knew where secret hiding places were along the route or path to these areas. The Underground Railroad had stations. These stations were safe places for escaping slaves to hide. Sometimes stations were private homes. Sometimes stations were public buildings. The stations were owned by agents. Agents were people who helped runaway slaves. They gave them food, clothing, and money. They gave them safe places to hide. At the bottom it says, "Danger." People caught helping an escaped slave also face danger. They could be put in jail. They could be made to pay a fine of $500 or more. On the next page, it's a picture of 2 houses that were actually used on the Underground Railroad. They were used to keep slaves safe. Spring Hill in northern Ohio, which is the above picture, had a hidden staircase. In the next section, Anything for Freedom, it says, "Not all slaves used the Underground Railroad to escape from slavery. Henry Brown had a special plan of his own. He had himself shipped in a box to freedom. Henry had the box shipped from Richmond, Virginia to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Richmond was a slave territory. Slaves lived there. Philadelphia was a free area. There was no slavery in Philadelphia. Henry hid in a box. The box was sent to Pennsylvania group. The group was against slavery. They pulled Henry out of the box. They pulled him to freedom. Freedom was not easy to get. A slave had to be brave. A slave needed to have a good plan. A slave needed help from others. Not many slaves shipped themselves to freedom, but the risk and danger in Henry's story are not unusual. There is a picture of a drawing of Henry Brown escaping from slavery in a box. If you remember, we read this book in class, Henry's Freedom Box. It says at the bottom, "Danger. Over 100,000 slaves ran away to freedom. They were willing to do anything to be free. They were even willing to risk their lives. In the next section, signals, songs, and codes, we start with signals. How did slaves know when, where, and how to escape? It is not possible to know for sure. Some people believe that patterns, or designs, were used to send messages to slaves. The patterns were on quilts or blankets. It is believed that quilts were hung carefully in special places. Then slaves could read the secret messages in the quilt patterns. So the picture we have here is a quilt pattern called the monkey wrench pattern. It was shown first. It meant you should get ready to escape. So be on the lookout for helping to escape. The next three patterns on the next page, the top one is the wagon wheel pattern. This pattern meant you should pack for a long journey. The next one is the bear paw pattern. When slaves saw this, they should get ready to head north. By following bear tracks, slaves could find water and food. And the last pattern on that page is the tumbling blocks pattern. This meant that the conductor or guide or the agent helper was in the area. The time was right for escape. Next, we have songs. Songs were also used to share secret instructions. The song Wade in the Water gave slaves a message. The song's words told slaves to wade or walk through rivers and streams. Slave hunters looked for escaped slaves. They used dogs to help hunt for escaped slaves. The dogs could smell and track humans. Dogs found it difficult to track slaves if the slaves were in water. The song Wade in the Water warned escaped slaves about this. At the bottom in the box it says Freedom Songs. Harriet Tubman often sang different songs to warn slaves. Harriet would walk where slaves could hear her singing. Slaves knew that the songs were codes. Codes have secret meanings. They tell messages in a different way than plain words. Harriet's songs told the slaves that she had come. She had to lead them to freedom on the Underground Railroad. In the picture on the next page, it says moving through water could help slaves escape from slave hunters and their dogs. So this is of a man hiding in the swamp. Last, we have codes. The song Followed the Drinking Gourd also had a message. It told escaped slaves to look for the North Star. The North Star is in the Little Dipper constellation. A constellation is a group of stars. The stars in the Little Dipper look like a long-handled dipper or cup. They also look like a gourd. A gourd is a hard-shelled fruit. When empty, a gourd can be used as a cup. The words of the song were used as a code. A code tells you how to find different meanings and information. The code told slaves to follow the constellation that looked like a drinking gourd. By following the North Star, slaves could find their way to freedom. They could head for freedom in the northern states. Do the words of the song sound like directions for escape to you? So the song says, "The river ends between two hills. Follow the drinking gourd. There's another river on the other side. Follow the drinking gourd. Where the great big river meets the little river, follow the drinking gourd. The old man is awaiting for you to carry to you to freedom if you follow the drinking gourd." So your assignment is to go back to each section. It tells you on the left-hand column what pages those sections are, and the title of the section is at the top of the page as well. In each section, I would like you to tell me one thing that you learned in the middle column and one thing you're still wondering about that topic in the right-hand column. So you need to make sure these things go together. Something you learned from this section and then something you're still wondering from this section. You need to fill them all out. You need to still have something you're wondering, whether you think you do or not. In the last page, you're going to choose one of those three things and tell me what the answer is. So basically, you're going to Google what you're wondering and see what you find out. This is a little chance for you to research. All right, best of luck.